covering all four major sports in the District of Champions. It's the DC Crossover Podcast with your hosts, Mike Cerrone and Ben Simpson.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the DC Crossover, episode 109. I am Ben Simpson. That is Mike Cerrone in a very busy DC sports week with the NFL draft creeping closer and closer, with the NHL playoffs creeping closer and closer, and with Nationals baseball going in the toilet. We have a lot to talk about on this Monday episode, but before we do, we always got to remind you where you can find the show in a variety of capacities, not only in all podcast platforms, but you can also download the Contender app. That's Contender with a K, and consume our content as well as other DC and Chicago sports content on a free app, the Contender app. You can also follow the show on Twitter at the DC Crossover and at Cerrone16, and on TikTok. DC _crossover _podcast is the search, is the title or
I can change it
or whatever.
At the end of the week. I can change it by, I think, the 28th.
At the end of the week, that'll be different.
Friday.
But
Friday,
for now,
baby.
that's how you find us on TikTok, where Mike posts a bunch of clips and things like that. It's a great resource for fun clips of the show. And this is going to be a busy week for clips and all that, because we're going to have some interviews with the NFL draft stuff coming up and with the Caps playoff stuff. So a lot going on and a lot to talk about on this show. But at the top, before we get into things, Mike, I've been on, I've told you, I'm on a reading kick this year. I'm trying to read 100 books. I'm about 31 in. And the last two books I've read have been all about the Lakers. So I did the whole Showtime, Magic, Kareem, all those guys, that book, and then I just finished up my Kobe, Shaq, and Phil Jackson book. And it got me thinking before the show, and I was curious, and I have a couple ideas, but I was just thinking, like, if there was a DC sports story to write a book about, like an interesting or weird or something, a DC sports story that you'd want to read a book about, what would it be? And I've got a little list here, and I want to get some of your thoughts on it. So my first one would be the Gilbert Arenas years. So he was here for, 8-9 seasons. Some really great basketball played and some mediocre basketball, and obviously Gil setting the league on fire with some of his numbers and things like that. And then, of course, the firearms incident at the very end, and just I feel like there's some stories in those that 2000s era of Gilbert Arenas basketball that he's told a lot of them on his podcast, and he's an outspoken guy, so he's said a lot of things. But I think getting the perspective of the other players and management and coaches and things like that, I think that could make for an interesting book.
Right. And you have to throw in there that I believe he won the scoring title one of those years. I believe he was scoring almost 32 points a game at one point.
Crazy numbies.
Which was nuts. And those numbies were exploding. And the biggest thing about Gilby was it was just because he always had that move. And I loved the move where he did the behind the back and then he pushed it forward, because he had a really great first step. He would go behind the back, launch it forward with his other hand, and just burst by somebody else at the top of the key. And then he would either dish it or drive to the hoop and try to get to the rack. But that was always something that I've always talked to my cousin who was, I don't know if you call her a legend at Chantilly High School basketball, but she went to college to play ball and all that kind of stuff. And those were the years of Gilbert Arenas. And we used to always talk about that, because she was a huge Wizards fan as well. But yeah, I mean, out of those that are on your list that you have on here, that would be a really big one. I think one of the ones, and this one might not hit really hard for you, and there's also a million different documentaries and things that are out there. And this one just came to mind immediately, which was Joe Gibbs. I would love just to hear Joe Gibbs be interviewed by, maybe like John Feinstein or something like that. John Feinstein is a really well-known writer around here, has a lot of really great books out there. And I'm not a huge book reader in general, but when it comes to his type of books, he does tons of sports books. And I think if he sat down and interviewed Joe Gibbs and Joe Gibbs sat there and was talking about every single Super Bowl and how he had to rearrange the team because he had a different quarterback for every single Super Bowl. When you had Theismann, Rippon, and Williams, our buddy Doug Williams, that's the biggest thing is I think if you sat down with Joe Gibbs and him explaining every single difference between all the Super Bowls and how different they were and how different his teams were, I think that would hit home for a lot of local football fans, obviously. And it would hit home for me because I wasn't alive technically for those Super Bowls. I might have been alive for the latest one, but maybe a newborn. But at the same time, it was something to hear about from families of my past, like my grandfather and my dad, different ones like that sat there and watched it on tube TVs and stuff like that. And they were on, flat screens and stuff like that. So something to hear about would possibly be Joe Gibbs's comparisons between all three of the Super Bowls.
No, I think that's not. I don't think that's a bad idea at all. And I think you're right in that he's a guy who has a lot of stories to tell. And I think chronicling his experiences would make for a great book. Another one that I have that it's kind of a weirder story, but I have Freddie Adu on my list because when Freddie Adu came into the MLS, he was crowned as like, this guy is going to be the next Pele. This guy's going to be the next Cristiano Ronaldo. Like, he's going to be the next greatest soccer player ever. He was 14 years old, making his debut in the MLS, which is, when you think about that, that's insane. I mean, like, I remember when I was 14, and I'm sure you remember when you were 14. It's like, imagine playing in a professional sports league.
We were playing wiffle ball.
14 years old. I mean, and he was crowned as the next big thing. And this was all before like Twitter and all this stuff. And like what he experienced with them, having to deal with the media and with the pressures, and how he just never really lived up to the hype. And he bounced around. He became a journeyman. I mean, he played on like 12 different teams and things like that. But that first year, I mean, especially being here locally, Freddie Adu, like the story was everywhere. And like people that don't even care about soccer were like tuning in to be like, this 14-year-old is playing. Like, that's a huge story. And I looked around, like, there has never been a Freddie Adu book. And I just feel like that would be an interesting story to learn more about him and his journey, but especially being a 14-year-old debuting in a professional soccer league, which is nuts.
Right. And that's the biggest thing that I look at when it comes to Freddie Adu is I remember specifically someone from my high school that went on to play in the MLS, and he was like, I guess, recruited to go out there and play in the MLS from high school because he was so good in his travel leagues and stuff like that. Now, it wasn't Freddie Adu, but that was as close as I've ever seen someone come is, MLS teams coming out and reaching out to you from your travel leagues when you're 16 years old. But like you said, 14 years old, this guy was supposed to be. And the funny thing was that he came out and played so well, like 6-7 years later, and everyone forgotten about him. And he was playing for some team. I forgot exactly what. Maybe it was like the US B team. I don't even know what it was. But he was like, he shined for like a 3-month period. And everyone was like, yo, man, maybe he's coming around. Oh my gosh.
It only took him 7 years or whatever. I mean, you think about a 14-year-old playing with grown men. It's just crazy. Right. I feel like that would be a wild story to get a little more background on. And then my other couple honorable mentions before we move on, I think it would be interesting to kind of chronicle Georgetown basketball, kind of the, starting with John Thompson, then John Thompson III, and then obviously now Patrick Ewing, and just kind of like where that program's been up and down and things like that. RG3, we knew that RG3 book that he wrote himself was supposed to come out at some point, and then they got pulled. I still think that there is an interesting story to tell there. Maybe not by him, probably by somebody else that's chronicling what happened, because I think RG3 would obviously bring his bias in, just like the Redskins at the time would probably bring their bias in.
Bring in Shanahan, bring in the Shanahans and Kirk Cousins and those type of guys who they're gonna have opinions, maybe not favorable towards him, but you could also get his side of the story, and you could also get other guys.
Yeah, get everybody's side rather than just RG3 writing with his vendetta against the organization, that sort of stuff. It just got me thinking about that because I've been reading some really great sports books, and it's like, man, we need a really good DC one. I mean, I still think a Strasburg-related book one day that will be written, and that will be an interesting one as well, just talking about how electric that debut was. Because, I mean, it was the biggest thing in DC sports. Yeah, you were there, and like, the entire tri-state area, the DMV, all eyes were on that game because it was like, this guy is the next Nolan Ryan, the next whatever, making his debut, and like the baseball world kind of stopped and watched him that night, which we haven't really had that in a long time.
And then the funny thing was that was basically like a playoff feeling game. Now that playoff may never ever happen because they were playing the Pirates and the Pirates sucked. But at the same time, every pitch that he threw that was 95 down the pipe, everyone went nuts. And 9 times out of 10, everyone was standing up for every strike. It was unbelievable.
And we just haven't seen anything like that ever. I mean, like, since then. I mean, yeah, this team won a World Series here, and obviously there was a lot of excitement, but anything around a specific one guy, it's like, I don't know.
Not even Harper.
We'll ever see
not even
again.
Harper.
Not even, yeah, Harper didn't have the same. Obviously, Harper had a ton of hype, but not the same. That Strasburg game, unbelievable. Well,
I think. Sorry, I know I cut you off. The last thing that I would say that I think is gonna happen is they're going to make a book about either the Cup run with the 2018 Caps or the 2019 World Series. I would prefer the 2019 World Series because that was a more, as you and I did, and we were texting every single out. Right. I will never forget that until I go to my grave, where we literally texted for the World Series. All right, 22. All right, 20.
Right.
Like every single out, we just started counting down. That was the best. I can't wait for that.
Jesse Doherty of the Washington Post did write a Nats book after they won the World Series, but I think but it was one of those things where it was really rushed to try to get it out because it came out like right after they won it all.
Sit downs.
It's called Buzzsaw, the improbable story how the Washington Nationals won the World Series, and I'm sure it's good, and he's a good writer, but I'm with you. Like, I think there needs to be a little more time spent on that book and like chronicle. Hey, go all the way back to the Strasburg debut and take us through the following years till we got to 2019 and what happened there. I think there's a lot of stories to write there, but those will be for another day. And Mike and I certainly will not be writing those stories because we are not talented whatsoever. Let's head into the rewind, a chance to recap the previous week in DC sports. We'll start with the Washington Nationals, and this was a up and down week for sure, mostly down, but things started on Tuesday with the doubleheader against the D-backs because there was a rain out on Monday, and the Nats swept the doubleheader. They beat the D-backs 6-1 on Game 1 and 1-0 Game 2. Josh Bell had a nice Game 1. Josiah Gray, great Game 1, 5 1/3, 1 earned run, 8 Ks, and Yohan Adon earned his first MLB win in Game 2. So those 2 wins, you were like, all right, this team's looking pretty good. They were almost 500 at the time, and then they lost ever since. Wednesday, losing to the D-backs 11-2. Eric Fetty gives up 6 earned runs. Nats give up 11 in 5 innings. Thursday, losing again to the D-backs 4-3. Soto had a chance with the bases loaded in the 9th and popped up. Nelson Cruz did homer in this one, and Keibert Ruiz with 2 hits. And that ended the D-back series. Giants series, not a whole lot to talk about. 3 games, 3 losses. Friday, losing 7-1. There was a whole controversy, quote-unquote, with the Giants stealing with a 6-run lead in the 9th, which was a bunch of BS because it's like, it's a 6-run ball game. Like, who cares? If this was like a 15-run game, yeah, get pissed, but it was 6 runs. We've seen 6-run comebacks all the time. So stupid. This time I'm totally against Davey and some of these other guys and what they were saying. It's like, guys, this is stupid. Saturday, lost to the Giants 5-2. Riley Adams homered in this one, which was the only bright spot. Aaron Sanchez did debut for the Nats, a guy who's bounced around with injuries and things like that, was on the Blue Jays for a while. He did debut for the Nats, allowed 4 runs and 6 hits in 4 1/3. And then Sunday, 12-3 loss. Jock Peterson homered twice for the Giants. Yadiel Hernandez did homer for the Nats, but they lose and get swept by the Giants, and they are now on a 5-game losing streak and are at 6-12, last place in the NL East. Not fun, but let's talk a team that is almost in the playoffs here. Not much more to go. Washington Caps.
The Washington Capitals, 44, 23, and 12. Currently, they are 4th in the Metro Division as we record this on Monday. 2nd in the wild card with 3 games to go. The Caps are 3 points behind Boston for the first wild card spot, 1 point behind Pittsburgh for 3rd in the Metro. Basically, Pittsburgh, they have 1 more game than us. They play Tuesday and Thursday. We play Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. 2 against the Isles and 1 against the Rangers. So a whole New York situation we got going on this week. So on Monday, they beat Colorado, a shorthanded Colorado team, might I add, but it's still a big win against the second best record in the NHL. Marcus Johansson, once again, he's kind of getting on fire here as of late, scores the go-ahead goal in that game. Samsonov stopped 24 shots, so not a bad game for him. Ovi and Garnett Hathaway also scored. The Caps quality for the postseason. Qualify for the postseason in 8 straight seasons. So once again, don't take that for granted because of the sole fact that the Caps have been straight dominated ever since Ovi has gotten here.
8 straight years of making the playoffs. I mean,
in hockey too. That's the biggest thing.
I mean, think about like the Wiz and the Nats and things like that. Like think about the stretches that they're dealing with of not making the playoffs, and you look at the Caps, and they're just the toast of the town. I mean, they're making the playoffs. They're just giving you a chance. Yeah, they only won 1 cup in those other 7, but you'll take that all day.
Right.
And you'll take those playoff appearances. So big credit to the Caps.
And the biggest thing is that a lot of people just say, oh, well, the Caps, they're not playing that well this year. They're making the playoffs. That's all that matters.
Making the playoffs is not easy.
They're making the playoffs, and they're only besides Florida, they're not that far off of the second overall seed. So anyways, on Wednesday, they lost to Vegas 4-3 in overtime. Shea Theodore scored in 2:09 into overtime to give Vegas the win. Ovi scored 2 goals for the Caps as well. Samsonov made 26 saves, so he's not playing too bad as of late. But overall, still need a little bit better performance from him. On Friday, they beat a terrible Arizona Coyotes team with the ugliest jerseys in all of the NHL. I have no idea why people like those jerseys. It's like a clip art from Microsoft Office or something like that from 1998. Yeah, Clippy made that. That logo. That's pretty awful. Connor Sheary and John Carlson scored in that game. Vitek Vanacek picks up his 4th shutout of the season, so pretty good for him. The Caps won their 7th in 9 games. They were on a tear until they lost to Toronto 4-3 in a shootout recently. Ovi got injured yesterday. It was an upper body injury. Didn't look too serious when he actually went down, in my opinion, but they've been keeping it close to the vest. I had some word for one of our friends that they've been keeping it close to the vest, not trying to disclose the injury, but we think he's going to be okay. TJ Oshie kind of reassured everybody, pump the brakes a little bit. It'll be all right. Lars Eller, Marcus Johansson, and TJ Oshie scored in that game. They were up 3-2, ended up losing 4-3 in the shootout. But that's unfortunate. But at the same time, their road trip wasn't too bad, but we'll get into that in a little bit. Moving on to our friends on the pitch, the DC United.
Yeah, DC United finally gets a win after 4 straight losses. It's been ugly, and after those 4 straight losses, they fired their head coach, Hernan Losada, who this was his 2nd season, I believe, at the helm, and he got fired last week, which was kind of wild, just being this early in the season. But I guess enough was enough. They fired him. Interim head coach Chad Ashton gets promoted to be the head coach. I mean, he's interim, I guess, for now. And he did the job. They beat a pretty good New England Revolution team 3-2. Taxi Fountas, who's like this Greek soccer player from the Greek national team, who the first name Taxi is awesome, obviously.
Drove it right into the goal.
And there you go. And he made his debut the game prior, and I watched some of that, and he was all over the pitch and having fun. But this game, he actually had an impact. 2 goals and an assist in his last time he came off the bench. This time he started. And yeah, I mean, it's always fun when a guy give him his first ever MLS start and he scores 2 goals for you. So they get the win there. They're now 3-0-4. And their next game will be Saturday, 7:30 p.m. against the 2-3-3 Columbus Crew. And I'll be going the week after that. I'm going to a game there at Audi Field, so I will report back. I got the all-inclusive seats, all-inclusive drinks and food. So your boy will definitely be reporting back, because if you recall, the longtime fans of the show remember on the website, on the DC Crossover website, when I did that for the Nats, I wrote a blog about my experience with the Nats Park all-inclusive seats, and that was
I actually saw that. I'm not gonna lie, I saw that on my so I was obviously cleaning out my phone a little bit because for some reason you get 3 picture messages and all of a sudden your phone is full, which makes 0 sense. That's a gripe for another day. So I have to clean my phone out consistently throughout the week all the time. But I did go through our text messages and tried to delete some of the old betting slips and all that kind of stuff. And I did see, pictures of attendees, and I was like, "Hey, that was his time." I did not delete it because that was a good memory.
Yeah, that was one of the best sports experience of my life for sure. And I'll see if Audi Field can top it, because their stuff is always a little bit, I'm not gonna say elevated, but they do try to bring in a lot of different cuisines because of the international audience and stuff. So I'm excited for sure. But let's get into, with the draft here approaching, let's get into some football talk.
We are the Commanders.
All right, it's almost here, the NFL draft, and we'll bring plenty of coverage of the draft for you guys. Mike will be chatting with Mitch Tischler this week. Tomorrow, he'll be chatting with Mitch and doing a little pre-draft talk, and then I will be hopping on the phone with Michael Phillips of the Richmond Times-Dispatch this weekend on Saturday and talking a little bit kind of reactions to it. And then Mike and I will, of course, be doing our episode next week, kind of diving into those reactions a little bit more together. But yeah, we got a lot of draft coverage for you, and it starts right now. As we are it's almost here, which is kind of crazy, Mike. I mean, when you think about when the season ends, and then you're just kind of waiting. Next thing you know, it's like, all right, it's here. The possible future centerpieces of this franchise are going to be picked here, hopefully. And it all starts with that 11th pick, and the discourse around the draft always is: should we trade back? Should we try to trade up? Is this the right position to draft? Are we looking for this guy? Defense? Are we looking for offense? What are we looking for? Every single scenario gets talked about, and we'll continue to talk about it. And I guess my first question to you, Mike, is: are we happy with the 11th pick? Or do you think you can drop back some spots and still get the guys that you're looking at,
The sexier pick is always a single-digit pick, because that is easier to shop. Because when people look at 11, it's also kind of a psychological thing. Because think about it this way: when you're a GM, you're like, man, I could go back into the top 10, or I could get 11. Like, no one really thinks about it's kind of like what businesses do when they say, "Oh, this is $4.99." They don't say it's $5. Because if they say $5, then people think, oh, it's $5. But when people are just looking at prices, they're like, oh, it's only $4.99. Everyone does it, and everyone thinks $4.99 is better than $5. Now, technically it is, because it's 1 cent better, but it's practically the same thing when it comes to tax and all that kind of stuff. So when you look at the 11th pick compared to like the 9th pick, now we're not shopping picks like that. Like, it's not that big of a deal, one spot, because all the teams need different needs. But for the 11th, I've heard a lot of different grumblings about, oh, they're looking to get more picks. They're probably going to trade back. We hear that every year. Yeah. And that's what irritates me. And that's what I'm going to talk about with Mitch Tischler tomorrow. So definitely check that out, as Ben alluded to earlier. I'm going to ask him specifically, because he does a Washington Football Talk podcast with JP Finley, who's also plugged in as well to the team very, very heavily. I just don't understand when you have a draft and these teams just don't trade back. And like, they have like 4 picks, like the entire draft. Like, look at the Rams. I don't think the Rams have a single pick this year. They might not even show up to the draft. It's crazy.
They got rid of a lot of those picks.
I mean, it's like, it's just funny to me, because why do you think the Patriots are always good? Why do you think the Patriots are always in the market to trade quarterbacks or to trade some player for picks? It's because they always have 12 picks a year, it feels like. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, 12, there's a lot more chance to hit on somebody out of 12 picks than 4. So when you're looking at it, I just don't understand why teams don't trade back. Now, I understand when it comes to, you get bad offers, or you get some offers that are nubs, because you might, get an offer from, say, the Bengals, who are picking 31st. You don't want to go from 11th to 31st, because, a lot of your prospects could be chosen by then. But really, when you're looking at it, I wouldn't go farther back than maybe 17, because, of course, the Eagles are picking in there twice as of right now. They might be trading one of their picks. I think they should. But you're looking at it and saying, you don't want your opponents in your division to be picking before you, because they know what you need more than anybody else.
Right.
So the biggest thing about it is, if you're going to go back, you have to go back probably before the Eagles' first pick, which I believe is 15 or 16. I forgot exactly which one it is. But I just don't understand why people don't trade back more often, because you can play mind games, but our front office has never been that great to play those mind games. They're always like, and then they trade 5 number ones for RG3. Now, I mean, it was great the first year, but obviously it didn't pan out. The biggest thing about it is that our draft room has never been one of the elites. It's always been the back half. We've always, we hit on someone like a Cole Holcomb, late in the draft, or a Cam Curl in the 7th round every now and then. But when you're looking at it, it's hard to hit on number ones all the time, but it feels like we're always in the mix where it's never a sure thing besides Chase Young and besides RG3. And the biggest thing about this year that really is irritating to me is that right now, I mean, it was all about wide receiver. We got to get weapons. We got to go offense. We got to go offense. And then over the last 10 days, everyone's like, yeah, Kyle Hamilton. Yeah, you got to get him. You got to get what? I don't understand where all these different things change. Now, I understand things come out and they try to play mind games against other GMs. So someone doesn't try to pick your pick early, or say the Eagles try to jump you to get that guy. But for me, I just think it's kind of crazy how, like you mentioned, we're not really happy with 11, but we can get a guy that's going to be an impact player at 11.
That fits. Yeah.
But I just don't want them to screw this up to the point where you go out and get somebody that is going to improve the club no matter what, but is going to be a detriment. Because I think, if you want to go out there and get a Stingley, sure, that's great at LSU. If you want to go get that guy, because we definitely need a number one corner. I've always said it. I love Kendall Fuller, but he's not a number one. That would be great. But what's that going to do for Carson Wentz? We're not as good as we were last year on offense. So why are we going to go out there and say, hey, Carson, Taylor Heineke was mediocre at best with this team. And because you're not who you were with the Eagles, you're going to have to go out there and try to see if you can do better. I mean, it just makes no sense. So I just think that also with Terry McLaurin trying to re-sign him, it's not going to look good if you go out there and you're like, we'll wait to the 4th round to get a wide receiver. No, that's not how it works. The best wide receivers go in the 1st round. And yes, you can find a diamond in the rough later in the draft, but that's hard. It's harder with a skill position like wide receiver. There's so many things that go into that position to the point where you can't just go and say, oh, look, another apple off the tree. Here we go. It doesn't work like that, because that's a skill position. And the corners, you can have a nickel corner go out there and cover a 4th round wide receiver for the most part any day. You look at De'Ami Brown. He was a pretty damn good wide receiver for North Carolina. Didn't do anything last year. And that's the problem. And I think they might be banking on Curtis Samuel way too much. He got hurt all last season pretty much.
Yeah, he was a milk box guy.
Overall,
where he was. Yeah,
exactly. The MIA guy. So anyways, just to answer your question, I know I went on there a little bit, but I'm kind of fired up a little bit about this draft in general. I'm pretty excited about it. I think if they can trade back within 4 picks, I'll be happy. But overall,
otherwise,
if they go 11, just go with it.
Yeah, if I had to rank as far as the importance, like the groups or positions in importance, in my opinion, for this team, I'm putting the receiver position number 1 as far as getting a talented receiver, for the reasons that you've said already, and we've talked about on the show multiple times that they need more help. You're looking at guys like Christian Watson or Drake London or there's some other options there out of Bama or things like that. There's some options there that would be, you just need to find some complementary pieces for Terry McLaurin. So I'm putting that number 1. I'm going to say cornerback is my number 2 for importance, like you're talking about. I mean, William Jackson struggled. You had St. Juste kind of struggle. I think you definitely could look at Stingley as an option. I mean, I think that's if he's there and you don't want to go wide receiver, I think you get Derek Stingley if that's more important to you. And then the last position group I'd say is probably middle linebacker. I think you could add some help there, especially guys helping stop the run and things like that. I think that could be the move there. So I'm going to go wide receiver, cornerback, and middle linebacker as far as my areas of importance
for my areas of importance, I would go with wide receiver number 1. Now, I don't care what you say. You need weapons. Carson Wentz needs weapons. You can't go out there and say, "All right, Terry, got to go out there, man." Curtis Samuel, oh, sorry, man, you're not in the lineup today. We know your Achilles is hurt, or you broke your back, whatever it is. I don't even know. You pulled your groin doing a sit-up. I don't even know.
Right.
If he's not out there, then Terry McLaurin is going to be leaned on once again to go out there and do what he does. And that's the biggest thing is you need to go out there and you have a chance. Now, is it a long shot? Possibly. You have a chance to get Garrett Wilson. Right now, he's, as what I've seen on here, he is the 6th best prospect coming out this year as a wide receiver. Now, some wide receivers, yes. Do they bust? Yes. Kelvin Benjamin, when he came out of FSU not too long ago, went to Carolina. Hopefully, Ron Rivera. I think Ron Rivera actually did pick him, which is not a great sign. So, Kelvin Benjamin, he was great out of FSU. Then he became a big fat. Okay, and then he couldn't run. He couldn't do anything. He was like Eddie Lacy, just couldn't stop eating for some reason. Couldn't shut off the pounds, and he was terrible. Yeah, that's right. But you're looking at this wide receiver group. There are wide receivers that you can get later in the rounds, but they're not going to have the skill like Garrett Wilson and like Chris Olave. Drake London, I'm not too familiar with him as much as Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, but I mean, you think about it this way. Michigan, as you know, you're a Michigan State guy, and you hate Michigan, but when they play Michigan has a really good team. Okay, they obviously were in the Final Four, but you're looking at it and saying Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave had really good games. Garrett Wilson, I think, had 10 catches for like 114 yards, something like that in that game. And yes, they were down, but Chris Olave also had like 7 catches for 88 yards or something of that nature. They had really good games against a really good team and their arch rival. The biggest thing about it is both those players are in the top 15, as I see on this website, for skill position. Now, like I said, Drake London, not really too sure about him. Obviously, scouts would get him a lot more than I would. But you have to go with one of those guys. If Garrett Wilson falls to you, you can't say, we're going to pass on you, bud. It's like you can't do that. He's the number 1 wide receiver in this draft. And no one's saying that he's a Malcolm Kelly. No one's saying he's a Devin Thomas, as you know some of those guys pretty well out of Michigan State. But it's just coming down to the situation where people think, oh, yeah, well, we need to go defense. No, we don't. Okay. Yes, our defense wasn't great last year. Right. But we did have a nice 4 or 5 game stretch where we actually played really well. Antonio Gibson was running the ball down people's throats, and we played a really good, solid 4 or 5 games. But the defense can be picked up, I think. I mean, look at Cole Holcomb, like I said before. I believe we got him in the 5th round out of North Carolina, and he's one of the best sure tacklers in all the NFL. I think he was top 10 in total tackles, I believe, last year. So the guy can tackle. The guy can play. Yeah, he might not be the best pass coverage, but you would have to think that Jamin Davis is actually going to go out there and perform better than he did this past year. He did have some glimpse later in the season, but the biggest thing is you have to think after his first year, development with coaches, with film, now he has film in the NFL that he can go off of. You'd have to think that he's going to improve a little bit. So my positions are wide receiver number 1. I want offensive line help. I want offensive line depth. We did lose Brandon Sheriff. He's an all-pro right guard. Okay, yes, we can slide guys in there. We did get Andrew Norwell from the Jags out of free agency. But the biggest thing about it is you need backups. Linemen get hurt so much more than I think everybody else because they go out there, they get rolled up on, they get tweaked or whatever. They have to go out, and if you miss 2 or 3 games, who are you going to throw in there? You're not going to throw in some 7th round pick that you just don't know who he is. You need to go out there and get someone. That's why I thought we needed to get an offensive tackle out of the 1st round last year. But anyway, that's besides the point. Sam Cosmi, we'll see what we got out of him at the right tackle spot. But I think offensive line depth as well, that we can probably get maybe 2 or 3, a guard, maybe a backup tackle or something like that. We'll have to see what Shadik Charles does. But I think, honestly, for the back end, it has to be DB help. So I think right now, I would say wide receiver is my number 1, and my 2A is offensive line depth, and my 2B is defensive backs. Now, if Garrett Wilson's not there, do we go, and Derek Stingley do we go Derek Stingley? Would I be upset about it? No, because right now he's projected the number 1 corner in the entire NFL. Yeah. NFL draft, I should say. And as you know best, Jeff Okudah was.
I was about to say, don't make it a Jeff Okudah situation.
Exactly, he was a sure thing, and all of a sudden, the past 2 years, he's been struggling.
You never know.
That's the thing. I think if you go wide receiver, I'm going to be more ecstatic than anything because again, you're showing Terry McLaurin, we care about you, man. We don't want you to be drowned in defensive backs every single year. And I just think that they've been neglecting the offensive weapon position so often that they just try to put Band-Aids on it like, oh, we're going to go sign Logan Thomas. Oh, we're going to go get John Bates out of the 5th round or whatever out of Boise State or whatever. I think it was 4th round. I mean, I just think they're throwing Band-Aids on it. But when you have a Carson Wentz that's on a prove-it-year deal, you need to give him weapons to see if you have anything because this is a year. You can't say, we'll pass on it and then maybe we'll see. No, because this is a prove-it year for him. And if he does well, he might stay. If he doesn't, kick him to the curb and move on. But as of right now, I think wide receiver, they have to go with number 1 pick.
Got to give him some guys he can throw the ball to down the field. I mean, that's a big part of it. As I mentioned, we'll be doing a lot of draft coverage here in the upcoming week. Look out for Mike's interview with Mitch Tischler coming later in the week, and my interview with Michael Phillips, which will be happening over the weekend. And that's pre-draft, it's post-draft, it's a lot of draft topics.
A lot of draft.
We're gonna touch briefly
the Washington Nationals
on baseball. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this because I do want to get to the Caps. I like to kind of recap these kind of where the team's at from the previous week's performances and things like that, and if there's any guys we can highlight as far as guys that are doing a good job. And when it comes to the pitching staff, we'll focus on that for a moment. Not a lot of positives there. I will say the guy that is continuing to be the lone bright spot on this pitching staff right now is Josiah Gray. He is now had 3 starts so far this season, a 3.14 ERA, 7 walks, 18 Ks, and a 1.33 WHIP, including Tuesday's performance of 1 earned runs over 5 1/3 with 8 Ks. He has been the best starter on this team this season. I mean, without a doubt. Patrick Corbin right now, you want to know his stats for the year, Mike? 4 starts, 11.20 ERA with 11 walks, 15 Ks, and a 2.56 WHIP. And for those who are not super familiar, it's basically walks or hits per inning. And so it means like how many guys are average on base every inning they pitch. This is over 2.5 guys he's allowing on base every single inning on average that he pitches. So you see these whips for some of these other guys on our team. I mean, Josiah Gray, 1.33. Yohan Adon, 1.66. Eric Fetty, 1.65. Josh Rogers, 1.36. Those are all relatively normal and good whips. Patrick Corbin at 2.56 with 11.20 ERA is disgusting. It is so bad.
It's like broccoli. It's disgusting. So in relation for the non-nerds out there, Ben just kind of alluded to it just briefly. The regular whips are, like maybe 1.3 to, like you said, maybe about 1.6. Those are like kind of the median,
sure.
For the most part for a average to above average starter.
Yeah,
the Max Scherzers of the world and Jacob deGroms, those kind of guys are always 0.95.
Usually right around 1. Yeah. 0.95. You'll see sub 1 whips, which are just unbelievable. But you'll see those great, for the studs. Yeah.
But you're seeing like Eric Fetty and stuff like that. 1.65, not terrible, but he's not a world beater. We all know that.
And he's got a 6.75 ERA, so he's in trouble too.
And Josiah Gray, my guy, I mean, you're looking at him, 1.33 is a phenomenal whip in 3 starts so far. Can he sustain that? Maybe, maybe not. We would probably expect him to be closer to 1.5 at the end of the season if he kind of continues this.
I agree.
But I just think that Patrick Corbin, man, the problem is that his first 2 innings, like if it's a gong show and everyone's just ringing the bell, then I mean his ERA is not even going to get close to what we predicted. Now, we kind of dug our heels in the sand and said, all right, we're going to stick to this. We're going to go with it.
Still plenty of season to go.
Thank God we did not put any money on that.
Yeah.
Because I'm telling you right now, he is not looking good at all. Now, I wish I put some money on Josiah Gray. That would have been nice. But I mean, like I said, I told everyone last week, circle the starts of Josiah Gray.
Yep.
So far, he's been phenomenal. I think honestly, his last start might have been, despite the innings pitch, because I wish he does go a little longer in some of these starts.
Mm-hmm.
But 3 hits, 1 earned run, only 2 walks, not too bad. 8 Ks. That might be his career high in Ks.
It's got to be. I mean, I feel like he's usually like a 4 or 5 K guy, but 8 Ks
right
in that game. I mean, that's fantastic. No, you're right. If you were going to go to a Nats game in person, go on the day that Josiah Gray's pitching, because you don't really want to see some of these other guys. And then last, on the hitting side, it's been rough. It's been rough with the bats here over the last 7 days. Really the only 2 guys that have been hitting, and I'm just looking at last 7 days stats. Josh Bell, 333 average. Keibert Ruiz, 333 average, just in the last 7 days, and about 15 for about 6 games worth. They've both been playing well, but the guy that unfortunately has not been playing great in the last week has been Juan Soto. In 7 games, 1.67 ERA. Not ERA, batting average. No home runs, no RBI. Only 4 hits in the last 7 games. He's getting on base. He did walk 4 times, but he's also striking out 4. So, yeah, it's 7 games in a 162 game season. I'm not too worried about it. And then for the season as a whole, Juan Soto's still batting .240 with a 840 OPS. So he's having a solid year, but he's always that guy you expect so much more out of because he's Juan Soto. It's I'm not worried about him, but it is just something to monitor. I mean, through 18 games, only 3 bombs and 3 RBI, and that's about it. We'll see. But Josh Bell, credit to him, man. He's having a hell of a season. 345 average this year. That's nuts. Nuts.
Josh Bell. I mean, obviously we are, we're kind of mentioning these games, and it's kind of unfortunate because you would think that if we had a squad that was formidable and that could actually go out there and possibly flirt with 90 games, we would have a pretty damn good record so far because we're playing trash early on. We're playing the Diamondbacks. Yeah. We're playing the Pirates.
Oh, I looked at that Diamondback series and I thought we could get 3 or 4 in that. Mm-hmm. And it looked like that too after sweeping the doubleheader, and then it's just been downhill.
Well, it's going to be a slippery slope all season. But when you're looking at our offensive stats and our offensive guys, like you said, we're not worried about Juan Soto. Honestly, if Josh Bell, I mean, he's starting off a lot better than he did last year. If you think about it this way, I honestly want to keep him. But again, we're rebuilding this situation. We're rebuilding this whole entire club in general. If you trade him and you go get,
you could flip him for something for sure.
That would be. I mean, you trade him. I mean, I don't want to go to the Dodgers again because we already poached a couple of their really good players. But go to a team that has a top 5 farm system and say, hey, but then again, a lot of those teams, aren't contenders. But you got to go out there and try to get. If you get Josh Bell, you got to try to go get a trade, kind of like Josiah Gray and Keibert Ruiz. You got to go get a prospect 100%. Like that. That's going to be an impact guy 2 years down the road. So
100%.
Overall,
I mean, especially
he's
a switch
nice.
hitter. So teams can use him in a variety of ways with the universal DH now too. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities for guys, and keep in mind this with the 2 extra with the extra playoff spots now in each league as well. There's going to be more teams that might be going for the playoffs and trying to get in. So there might be more opportunity for some contenders to possibly flip him too. So I think that there could definitely be some interesting trade deadline stuff.
Also, Sean Doolittle, by the way. Sean Doolittle, by the way, because he's been pitching really well too.
Right, he has.
Now we're not going to say that he's going to. Now we're not going to say that he's going to continue this throughout the rest of before the trade deadline. And like you said, he's still dinged up, but. When he comes back,
you're right.
Like that.
With how he was pitching, like he was another guy. I mean, all these relievers are guys that you're going to probably – and there's been some solid relievers like Victor Arano and things like that. Like those are probably guys that if they continue what they're doing, they will likely be flipped at the deadline. I mean, that's just the reality of the world. So we'll see what happens there. We'll touch briefly on the Caps a couple minutes here before we move on. And obviously the Caps will be heavily featured on the show very soon with the playoffs and things like that. So we're not pushing him to the side. It's just, a lot to talk about. But the biggest news, of course, was Alexander Ovechkin. You talked about him crashing into the boards, leaving that game. And we're just not hearing anything right now. I mean, everything on Twitter. I mean, we were looking before the show, and you were talking to some sources, and it's just like nobody's really talking at this point. You might, the good thing is you do have 3 games left. Where if you needed to rest him, you don't want to rest him for all 3 of those games because you don't want him to be cold heading into the playoffs. But at the end of the day, you need a healthy, at least a semi-healthy Alexander Ovechkin in the playoffs, with especially how much he's scoring lately. So, are you nervous at all about the situation, or do you think it's just going to kind of resolve itself pretty easily?
For me, when I saw the whole entire crash into the boards, now should it have been a penalty? I kind of think so. But do I think it was deliberate? No, not at all. I mean, it was a breakaway. The goalie was trying to knock the puck away. And he tripped. Yeah, it's okay. It's a common play, but at the same time, it just didn't look as bad because he kind of slid into the boards from looked like 5-6 feet away, so it wasn't too far. So it kind of he was just kind of gliding into the boards. Now, could he have braced himself a little bit too awkwardly? Maybe. So I mean, you could say it might be a bone bruise or something like that. The best part about it is just what you said. Right now, we're already in the playoffs. It's not like we need him to make a late push or something like that. But you're looking at this situation, and I honestly think if you want to rest him on Tuesday, go ahead, and then just say, hey, take a few, just relax a little bit. If it's a bone bruise, let it heal a little bit, because we need you full strength when the playoffs come around.
Absolutely need him.
That's going to be crucial. That's the biggest thing. If he's missing time or missing games or whatever, or not 100%, this team ain't going to go far. And I'm going to be flat out about that, because this is not a Oilers situation where if McDavid missed some time, you got Drysdale. It's not a situation where you have, if Nylander missed some time for the Maple Leafs, you got Austin Matthews. It's not a situation like where you got a 1-2 punch. Yes, Backstrom is a great player. Yes, Oshie is a great player. Yes, Tom Wilson's a great player. Kuznetsov, you can go down the list. But those guys aren't superstars. Alex Ovechkin's a superstar.
Right.
Okay.
Do you have other guys that could score? Yes. Do you have other guys that bring everything to the table that Alexander Ovechkin and actually strikes fear in the hearts of the opponents? Only Ovi. He's the guy. Yeah. He needs to be on the ice. And simple.
Exactly. And that's the problem is when you're looking at the last 3 games, it's not that bad. And like you said, you don't want to sit him all 3 games because you like for him to actually have some ice time. But I mean, you have 2 games against the Isles. Isles are out. They're not going to care.
You could sit him for those if you need to.
Yeah, you can for that. And then the Rangers, they're already pretty much locked into their spot because the Pens and us can't catch them, and they're not going to be able to catch the Hurricanes. So they're probably going to rest some guys there too. Also, the biggest thing is depending on when their games start. I know that I believe there's the games start on Sunday, if I'm not mistaken, maybe on Monday. It might be on Monday. It's 3 days after, so I believe it might be Monday. So you have the whole entire weekend to rest up. Obviously, you're going to prepare. You're going to have some skates and stuff like that for the weekend and whatnot to prepare for whoever we're going to play at that time. But the biggest thing is you got 2 games against the Isles that you can rest him, and that's 3 or 4 days of rest if it's like a bone bruise. That's what it looked like to me. And it could be kind of like just a stinger where he's like, oh man, it really hurts, it's really sore or something like that. Get some work done. He is 36, let's be honest. But in my opinion, if it was something just like a stinger, I think they would have said something. I think they would have said, oh yeah, he's good, it's just a minor injury, nothing too bad, he'll be out on the ice. That's what worries me, because this morning nothing came out. Everyone's like, we don't know. Talked to one of our sources for the show, and he says, no idea. Close to the vest, no idea. They're not releasing anything. So that's the one thing that scares
me. That's all we know. There was a team picture taken today, and he was there, and he was in it. I don't know what that means, but he was there. So, it's going to be interesting to see. And you're right. Those games do start Monday. So we'll keep an eye on that situation, and Mike will definitely be on top of it as he talks to Andrew Gillis of NBC Sports Washington later in the week to get some preview of the playoffs. And you'll probably at some point here, Mike and I do a post-game show or something like that. So the best way to keep up to date with that will be the Twitter at the DC Crossover and at Cerrone16 to keep up to date with when we are on the air. And that's the Contender app and when we do the live stuff. So download that app. It's completely free. Let's hit up the final app, a chance to give some quick analysis on some bigger stories in sports. 90 seconds on the clock. Here we go. The New York Yankees throw garbage all over the field and at Guardians players after their walk-off win, Mike. This video was everywhere.
It's the same thing as New York fans. They're all garbage.
Yeah, I mean, I can't argue
Not
with
surprised they have
it. The latest on the playoff series right now, Suns-Pels tied up at 2-2. Mavs-Jazz tied up at 2-2. Warriors up 3-1 on Denver. Grizz and T-Wolves tied up 2-2. Miami up 3-1 on the Hawks. Philly up 3-1 on the Raptors. Bucks up 3-1 on the Bulls. And Boston up 3-0 on the Nets. Which one of these series most surprises you, Mike?
Boston and the Nets. I called it last week. I said the Nets were going to win. And KD is just not the same player. He honestly can't take over a game like he used to within the last 6-7 years. And I think after that Achilles injury, it's just kind of make him not say washed up, but he's definitely not the best scorer in the world anymore.
I definitely love seeing Chicago get knocked out against the Bucks because the Bucks. I had my money. I had the money at the beginning of the year on the Bucks as my NBA champion back to back.
Nice.
And that's still looking pretty good.
Looking good.
Hunter Dickinson returning to Michigan. Caleb Love returning to UNC next year. It's always nice to see some of those bigger names where you think like they could probably go into the draft, but then they come back to try to give it one more go. It's nice to see that, but then you also go, you also could be potentially hurting your draft stock and missing out on some money.
Yeah, honestly, I think that the agents come into play when it comes to that because depending on how it's I mean, think about the NFL right now when you're seeing, next year's going to be a QB heavy draft. Like, obviously it's different when it comes to different sports, but if you're looking at it and saying, my agent says, hey, you're going to improve your draft stock if you go back one more year and just grow one more year. And a lot of NBA scouts also say that to them too. So there's a lot of voices that are being there's a lot of voices that are kind of circulating when these guys are planning to come out or not. It depends on if they make the right decision, but usually when it comes down to it, I think the agents have a lot to do with that because they're kind of plugged in saying, hey, my guy wants to come out. What do you think? Where do you draft? And then honestly, if they sit there and say, well, he's probably not going to go in the top 15 or whatever, then they're like, yeah, maybe I'll stay in, not going to really risk it. You don't really think about, I'm going to risk it. But you could have a Kevin Ware situation. You could have something like that. Where all of a sudden it's just unfortunate. But I think returning is never a bad thing. But at the same time, like you said, you got to risk it to get the biscuit sometimes.
Right now, the consensus is the top three picks will be in some order: Jabari Smith, Paolo Banchero, and Chet Holmgren in some capacity. We don't know the exact order and who will get who, but that's
Big Chet.
There.
That's what they call him. BC, Big Chet.
Big Chet. Big Chet. They call me Big Belly as we get into our trivia here. I feel like I've been getting them wrong left and right, just like my moneyline picks. It's been rough.
Oh, boy. We're going to get to that in a second.
Yeah, I just can't do anything right, but get me back on track here. What do you got for my DC Sports Trivia question?
So our DC Sports Trivia question of episode number 109. And I'm going to reword this because it's kind of a weird worded question. And it's also, I'm going to make it more simplified.
Please do. I need a win.
I think you'll get it. Which Nationals draftee, is that a word?
Yeah.
Which Nationals draftee was picked as the college player of the year before being picked by the Nationals in the 2011 MLB draft?
2011 NBA draft. Jesus Christ. 2011. And you're claiming this is easy.
I'm claiming it's easy.
I guess my question right off the bat would be, what position? Is it a pitcher or is it a?
Can't answer that.
Okay. Is it a?
That's gonna give it away.
What do you mean?
That's because it's gonna easily give it away.
Well, why would it easily give it away?
You want to give you a hint? Is that you want to do that?
Pitcher?
No, I'm going to give you a hint.
Okay.
The college
player of the year. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. The college has blue in its color.
I mean, what the?
Okay. The college deals with Asian cuisine.
Deals with Asian cuisine? What does that even mean?
Rice University.
Oh, so Rice is Rendon, I believe, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. I was like, what?
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be better than that.
You threw me off there. Okay. That was
Asian cuisine,
I was
man.
thinking, I will say, before you gave me the hint, Rendon was in my mind before you gave me the hint, because I was like, all right, timing wise, it kind of lined up.
Here's the actual question.
Yeah.
Who won the Dick Hauser Trophy for College Player of the Year before being picked 6th overall by the Nationals in the 2011 MLB Draft?
Okay, yeah, you could have said that whole thing.
Well, I thought you would have known it right off the bat, but
yeah, well, I was close.
Who else did we draft that was
I got
the
it right,
College Player of the Year?
Yeah. This hopefully will be easy. What 3 things does an NHL player have to do in a game to complete a Gordie Howe hat trick? What are the 3 things you need to do in a game for the Gordie Howe hat trick?
Is it an obvious one? Is goal one of them?
Yeah. Yep. Goal.
Okay. Goal, assist.
Yep. Those are 2 of the 3. What's the third?
I don't think hit is one of them.
Hit? No, hit is not one of them.
Don't get me started. I already gotten some beef on Facebook about hits.
Oh, great.
I'm gonna say. Oh man, I know this too. Goal, assist, and penalty.
Kind of. Can you be more specific?
A major penalty.
Sure. I mean, yeah, getting in a fight, which would obviously lead to a major penalty.
Yeah, I was going to 5-minute. Yeah,
it's a goal, assist, and a fight is a Gordie Howe hat trick. Gotta love it.
I'll take it. I'm going to take a 3/4 of a point there because
there you go. The fans at home are keeping track.
I'm sure they are.
Let's hit up the money line, sponsored by DraftKings, and boy, this has been a bloodbath this time. I mean,
Jesus,
it's been bad. And I told you this last week that I was the way I'm doing my picks this week is I made my picks and then I reversed them all. So I went against my brain. So these 2 picks here are not what I want, but I'm doing it because I don't trust myself because I am done so bad. So my lock, originally I wanted the Hawks to cover the 3 points as the Dogs. Instead, I'm taking the Heat covering the 7 as a favorite over the Hawks. So I'm going to say, Heat -7. And then, I don't believe it either. And then my Dogs, I'm going to say the Celtics finish off the Nets. It's a 1-point difference either way. So it's like it's a pretty close line, basically, yeah. So I'm just going to say the Celtics get it done and sweep.
Which would be unbelievable.
Nets.
That would be unbelievable.
Yeah. That's why I wanted to pick the Nets. But you know what? This is the strategy, and I'm going to go for 2 for 2. Okay.
Not gonna lie. I did pick the Warriors in Game 4. They lost, and I did pick the Suns, and they lost. So
we got to go against ourselves right now.
Yeah.
Right. We get back on track. Then you go back to your regular picks.
Oh yeah, you saw my text the other day. I was not too happy. Anyways, so my lock is over 2.5 goals for tomorrow's Champions League final or semifinal game between Man City and Real Madrid.
Right.
I honestly think Man City probably will take down Real Madrid, unfortunately, because I'm a Madrid fan. But over 2.5 goals, -140 is my lock on that one. It's +110 to go under 2.5. But both these teams have been scoring at will. Man City, not so much in the second legs of their games. But the first legs, they've been scoring like 3 goals a game over the last 3 rounds. And Madrid has been scoring pretty well in the first leg as well, or just in general. Karim Benzema has been playing really well. But Man City, I saw a couple articles today that said, oh, they have to win this because everyone else, Madrid, Barcelona, Man U has been in it. Chelsea's been in it. Different teams like that have actually been doing well. And Man City has not yet to win it in recent years. So over 2.5, -140 for my lock for tomorrow's UCL game. And then my Dogs, I'm going with the Pellies. I think the Suns, without Booker, They don't have that huge scoring threat, and their bench has been okay, but not great. And the Pellies are just, I mean, with CJ McCollum, that might have been the move of the year so far because he wasn't even that great last game. I think the one guy you got to look at is Valanciunas going against DeAndre Ayton, because that's a huge deal, because DeAndre Ayton, he's supposed to be better than Valanciunas, but Valanciunas actually outperformed him in the second half.
Oh, I love Valanciunas. He's always been one of my favorite guys. I always wish the Wizards could have gotten him.
Right, exactly. But he didn't really play too well. I believe in the first game, but last game he had like 26 points and like 15 boards, which is unbelievable. That's awesome. So he was crashing the boards, but plus 6.5 for a team that is on fire. Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum, Valanciunas. I mean, give me the Pels, baby. Give me the Pels.
I like it. I like the pick. We'll see if it works out for you. Mike's in the lead right now, but it's been a rough round of picks, that's for sure. So hopefully our luck changes this week. So as we mentioned, as we wrap up the show, definitely follow all the social media channels for the latest, because we got a lot going on here. Interviews galore upcoming. So follow the show at the DC Crossover and at Cerrone16. The TikTok, of course, DC_crossover_podcast. Download the Contender app. That's Contender with a K. It's completely free. Download that app so you can hear live post games and things like that, like we did throughout the football season. And we did some Caps post games last year too. And a lot going on here in DC Crossover land. So definitely stay tuned for all of that. And fingers crossed for this NFL Draft Round 1 here. This pick coming up later this week. Man, they got to get it. They got to get this right, Mike. They got to get this right. Make us happy. We'll be breaking it all down next week on the show. That is Mike Cerrone. I am Ben Simpson. We will see you next time on the DC Crossover.